Hi, my name is Joe Norman, and I'm a Partner Solutions Architect with AWS. Today I'm going to go through a demo showing you how to transfer data from Zendesk support to Amazon S3 using Amazon AppFlow. So let's go into the AWS Management Console. So first you need to get into AppFlow. You might have seen that I have it on my quick links, but I'm just going to show you. You can search for it pretty quickly. All right, this is the AppFlow landing page in the console. We're going to hit Create Flow. All right, on the first page of setting up an AppFlow flow, I'm going to create a flow name. This can be whatever you want. So we'll call it Zendesk S3. And description is optional. You can just type anything you want. So I'll type anything I want right here. For encryption, the service by default encrypts in transit and at rest, but you can also choose to use AWS KMS to use your own custom AWS KMS keys. That's AWS Key Management Service. I'm just going to use the default encryption from the service. You can also tag it. So if you want to do things like tagging, if you had multiple companies in your account, you could tag it by company names. So I have a fake company called RJ Demos, which I'll be using in this demo. I'll tag that, but that's completely optional as well. All right, so on the next page, you're going to choose your source. And for this demo, again, we're using Zendesk, which you can see the set of current sources at the time of filming right there. So I'm going to choose Zendesk. And now I need to create a connection to Zendesk. So this is going to involve me flipping to the Zendesk page. So one thing I do know right now, though, is my Zendesk subaccount URL. So I'm going to type that in here. And now I need to go into Zendesk to get the rest. So in Zendesk, I just click this little cog here to go in the admin settings of my Zendesk tenant. And then go to the API page, which I've already had loaded up. And go to Oauth Clients, add Oauth Client. The client name can be whatever you want. I'm going to make it the same as my unique identifier just for ease because it's automatically going to fill that in. So it needs to be unique. So let's go with my last name, company, and then how about that name I gave my flow. That should be pretty unique. And that automatically fills. You can do a description if you want. I'm going to leave that blank. Company auto fills. You can do a logo. And here's the important redirect URL. This is actually provided by the Zendesk, probably the AppFlow documentation. It's different by region, and US East 1 has its own special format, but US West 2 and any other region other than US East 1, you just change the region right here if you can see this. But that, again, that's from the documentation. Paste that in, hit save. Now it's going to give me a secret that can only appear once. So I need to save it. If you lose it, you can just remake this OAuth connection. So I'm going to copy that secret. I'm going to put it into my notepad in case I lose it somehow. And I will be deleting this after, so no one watching this video can hack my Zendesk account. Now we're going to take this information back to Zendesk. So connection name, probably should have noted down the client name or the unique identifier. That's that. So client ID. Oh, that copy didn't work, didn't take. Give me not pasting properly. There's a rule with demos that when you do a demo, you'll mess up. And usually something technical will go wrong, but let's try to avoid that. Now, you may need to sign in. I'm already signed in, so I've got the Zendesk account open on another tab. And now you're going to allow these permissions, read and write all user data to your Zendesk account. And that is allowing this OAuth client to do that with these tokens. All right, once you do that, you can choose ticket or user. For this example, I'm going to use ticket, and these are the Zendesk objects using the Zendesk support API. And now you can choose a destination. For Zendesk, we allow Amazon S3, Amazon Redshift, Salesforce, and Snowflake. And I'm going to use S3 for this. And now you need to choose a bucket. I've got one made. You may want to make your own. You can also put a prefix on it. I'm not going to do that. Under additional settings, you can choose the format that you want the data to be saved as. So JSON by default. You can also do Parquet, CSV. You can do these other settings as well. So I'm going to keep it as JSON, keep the defaults. JSON will be a little easier to look at. Parquet is a little bit easier to use for certain workloads and use cases. Like if you were to use Amazon Athena, Parquet is a good choice. I'm going to use JSON to give you a good visual of the data at the end. For your flow triggers, you can choose to run on demand, which means when you push the button, the flow that you're creating here immediately runs and pulls the data from Zendesk. You can also choose to run on a schedule. And so it's similar to setting a recurring meeting in your email client. So you've got all these choices, set it like every 2 months if you want, only every 60-ish days, start and end date. So you can choose to transfer new data only for Zendesk, which means data that's transferred after the update date of the last one you sent. And we'll see that update date field on the next screen. I'm going to run on demand here so that I can actually show it to you reliably. All right, the next screen lets you map your fields from Zendesk. So here's what the ticket object in Zendesk gives me, some of the fields. So I'm going to choose account ID. You can just map everything if you want. I'm going to do account ID, a URL, so I could choose to quickly go to it if I wanted more information. Get these two date fields, created date and updated at, created at and updated at. And how about the ticket subject? That's always interesting. That should be enough for now. So now I'm going to map fields directly, and that just maps what the source name will map as in your output data. You can also choose to mask fields here. So if you had subjects, well, it would be easier if it was the user who created it. This would make more sense, but bear with me. So you can choose to make a modification. For example, if you had social security numbers, you might want to mask the first few digits of it. If you had other PII like that, email address might make sense. You can mask it. You could also truncate text fields. I'm not going to do that here because I don't have any PII. But that is an option you have. Next thing you can do is add a validation. So a validation is allows you to check your data for valid or invalid data. So for example, I want to make sure that there's always a subject in mine. So if the subject is missing or null, I'm going to exclude that record. You can also terminate the whole flow from that as an example validation. You can add multiple rows of validation if you want to. I'm just going to do one here. Now on the next screen, kind of similar in concept to validation is a filter. This decides what will and won't be included. So for example, updated at, kind of how we did by default here with Zendesk, it's only going to do updated at the last time you run a flow if you run it on a schedule. Since this is an on-demand flow, I want updated at after a certain date, and I'm going to go with September 7th. So I know I don't have so much data after September 7th that I'm going to run into my Zendesk API limits. And that is something you need to be aware of, is this can go over your API limits on Zendesk, so you need to make sure there's not too much data for that. And you'll just get an error if that happens and be able to change your settings. All right, this is a summary screen, everything we just made. Now I'm going to create the flow. All right, this flow is created, and now since it's on demand, I need to run it here in the top right. This will take a few seconds. If it's a ton of data, it could take a little longer than a few seconds, but this should be good enough without me having to pause the recording. There we go. And then that gives you a URL to go into your data directly, or it's stored in S3. Let's make sure we're zoomed in enough here. Let me zoom it in a bit. So this is the prefix that was made automatically. It may split it into multiple files depending on the size of your data, and it does that in a way that makes sense with the APIs and with the infrastructure behind the scenes. I'm gonna save that. Since it's a JSON, I want to do a little bit of, actually I should have opened in folder. I want to save it as a .json to make the work of my editor a little easier. All right, and here's what your data looks like. Let me format the data, format the document. It makes it a lot easier to see. So on here, you can see each little set within braces is a single ticket in Zendesk. And that is what your data looks like in S3. And you can do pretty much whatever you can imagine from there. And that is it for the demo. Thanks for joining.